The coffee shop on Fifth Street had become my sanctuary over the past 3 months. Every Tuesday and Thursday at 2 p.m., I'd settle into the corner booth with my laptop, pretending to work on my freelance graphic design projects while actually watching people walk by through the rain-streaked windows. Seattle's perpetual drizzle had a way of making everything look cinematic, even the mundane. That particular Thursday in October, the autumn leaves were scattered across the wet pavement like abandoned love letters. I was nursing my third Americano when I saw her Rebecca, my girlfriend of 2 years, walking hand in hand with someone I didn't recognize. My chest tightened as I watched them through the window, laughing at something he'd whispered in her ear. I should have looked away. Should have minded my own business. But something about the way she tilted her head toward him, the same gesture she used to reserve for me, kept my eyes glued to the scene unfolding outside. They disappeared around the corner toward the residential area where Rebecca's best friend lived. Rebecca had mentioned visiting Amy that afternoon, said she needed to help her reorganize her bedroom after her recent breakup. I remembered because I'd offered to drive her, but she'd insisted on taking the bus, claiming she needed the alone time to think. The bitter taste in my mouth had nothing to do with the coffee. I packed my laptop with trembling hands, left a $10 bill on the table, and stepped out into the cold Seattle air. The rain had picked up, turning from a gentle mist into actual droplets that soaked through my jacket within minutes. But I barely felt it. My mind was racing, trying to rationalize what I'd just seen. Maybe it was innocent. Maybe he was just a friend. Maybe I was overreacting because of my own insecurities, the same ones Rebecca had gently called out during our last serious conversation about trust and communication. But as I walked toward Amy's neighborhood, a part of me already knew I was walking toward the kind of truth that changes everything. The streetlights were just beginning to flicker on as I approached Maple Avenue. Amy's house sat at the end of a quiet cul-de-sac, surrounded by overgrown hedges and a garden that had clearly seen better days. I knew the house well. Rebecca and I had spent countless evenings there during Amy's recent relationship drama, offering support and sharing takeout on her back porch. I hesitated at the corner, feeling like a creep for even being there. What was I planning to do? Knock on the door? Peer through windows? The rational part of my brain screamed at me to turn around, go home, and simply ask Rebecca about it when she got back. But then I saw them. Through Amy's living room window, barely visible in the dim light from the street, I could make out 2 figures on the couch. The garden lights that usually illuminated the front yard were off, casting the scene in shadows. But there was no mistaking what I was seeing. Rebecca was sitting in his lap, her arms wrapped around his neck, their faces close enough that I could tell they were either talking intimately or about to kiss. The way her body melted into his, the casual intimacy of their positioning, this wasn't the body language of friendship. I stood there in the rain for what felt like hours but was probably only minutes, watching the woman I loved be tender with someone else in a way that felt like mine. The cold water dripping from my hair mixed with something warmer on my cheeks, and I realized I was crying. My phone buzzed. A text from Rebecca. Still at Amy's. Might be late. Love you. I stared at the message, then back at the window where she was now laughing at something he'd said, her hand resting comfortably on his chest. The disconnect between her words and her actions hit me like a physical blow. I turned and walked back toward downtown, my sneakers squelching in the puddles, my whole world quietly falling apart with each step. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in our shared bed, staring at the ceiling while Rebecca slept peacefully beside me, her breathing steady and untroubled. She'd come home around 11, apologizing for being so late, explaining that Amy had needed more emotional support than expected. She kissed my forehead and curled up against me like she always did, but her touch felt different now, foreign, somehow. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her in that window again. The next morning, Rebecca made coffee and toast like she did every Friday, humming softly while she moved around our small kitchen. The normalcy of it all felt surreal. How could she be so calm, so unchanged while I felt like I was drowning? You're quiet this morning, she said, setting a mug in front of me. Her dark hair was pulled back in a messy bun, and she was wearing my old University of Washington t-shirt, details that would have felt intimate and sweet just 2 days ago. Just tired, I managed, wrapping my hands around the warm ceramic. She studied my face with those green eyes that had first caught my attention at a bookstore in Capitol Hill. Are you sure? You seem distant. The irony of her concern almost made me laugh. Or cry. I wasn't sure which. Rebecca, I started, then stopped. How do you ask someone you love if they're cheating on you? How do you tell them you saw them with someone else without admitting you followed them? What is it, Tyler? She sat down across from me, reaching over to touch my hand. Her fingers were warm, familiar, and the gesture made everything worse. Who were you really with yesterday? The question hung in the air between us. I watched her face carefully, looking for tells, the slight tightening around her eyes when she was uncomfortable, the way her lips pressed together when she was choosing her words carefully. What do you mean? I told you I was with Amy. Just Amy? Now I could see it, that flicker of something. Guilt? Panic? She pulled her hand back, wrapping it around her own coffee mug. Tyler, what's this about? I saw you. The words came out quieter than I'd intended. On Maple Avenue. With someone else. Her face went completely still. For a moment, the only sound in our kitchen was the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of traffic from the street below our apartment. You followed me? Her voice was barely above a whisper. I was at the coffee shop. I saw you walking with someone and I trailed off, realizing how pathetic it sounded. Rebecca stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. She walked to the window, looking out at the courtyard of our apartment complex where Mrs. Patterson was already hanging laundry despite the early hour. His name is Alex, she said finally, not turning around. I met him at Amy's book club 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. And? She turned around then and I could see tears forming in her eyes. And I've been trying to figure out how to tell you that I think I'm falling in love with him. The words hit me like a physical blow. I'd prepared myself for denial, for anger, even for confirmation that something physical had happened. But hearing her say she loved someone else, that was a kind of pain I hadn't anticipated. Have you too? No, she said quickly. We haven't slept together. But Tyler, I can't keep pretending that what we have is enough anymore. What we have isn't enough? I stood up, my voice rising. We've been together for 2 years, Rebecca. We lived together. We were talking about moving to a bigger place, maybe getting engaged. That's just it, she interrupted, her own voice getting stronger. You were talking about those things. I was just going along with it because it seemed like what I was supposed to want. The kitchen felt too small suddenly. I needed air, needed space to process what she was telling me. So what now? I asked. What happens to us? Rebecca wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. I don't know. I've been trying to figure that out for weeks. I never meant for this to happen, Tyler. I never meant to hurt you. But you did it anyway. She nodded, fresh tears spilling over. I did it anyway. I stood there looking at her, this woman I'd shared a bed with, made plans with, imagined a future with, and realized I was looking at a stranger. The Rebecca I thought I knew wouldn't have been capable of this kind of deception. But maybe I'd never really known her at all. I think I should stay somewhere else tonight, I said. Tyler, please. Can't we talk about this more? Can't we try to work through it? I shook my head. There's nothing to work through, Rebecca. You're in love with someone else. That's not something we can fix with conversation. As I walked toward our bedroom to pack a bag, I heard her crying behind me. Part of me wanted to turn around, to comfort her, to try to save what we'd built together. But a larger part of me knew that what we'd built had been built on something that was never as solid as I'd believed. I spent the weekend at my brother's place in Ballard, sleeping on his couch and trying to make sense of how my life had imploded so quickly. Ryan had always been the practical one between us, 5 years older, married to his college sweetheart, with a mortgage and a dog and all the markers of successful adulthood that I'd been slowly working toward. You want to talk about it, or do you want to drink beer and pretend it's not happening? He asked Saturday evening, handing me a bottle of IPA from a local brewery. Both. I said, taking a long sip. We sat on his back deck, watching his neighbor's kids play in their yard. The Seattle skyline was visible in the distance, and for the first time in days I felt like I could breathe properly. She say why? Ryan asked after a while. I told him everything about seeing Rebecca with Alex, about the confrontation, about her admission that she'd been questioning our relationship for longer than I'd realized. Ryan listened without interrupting, occasionally nodding or making non-committal sounds. That's rough, man, he said when I finished. But can I ask you something? Sure. Were you happy? I mean really happy before all this happened. The question caught me off guard. What do you mean? I mean, when you talked about Rebecca, about your relationship, you always sounded kind of settled. Like you were going through the motions because they were the right motions to go through. I started to protest, but he held up a hand. I'm not saying you didn't love her. But love and being right for each other aren't always the same thing. Maybe she figured that out before you did. His words stung because they contained a grain of truth I wasn't ready to examine. Had I been truly happy with Rebecca, or had I just been comfortable? Had I been building a life with her because I loved her, or because it felt like the next logical step? My phone had been buzzing periodically all weekend, texts from Rebecca asking if we could talk, missed calls, voicemails I hadn't listened to. I'd been ignoring them all, but Sunday evening I finally gave in and checked her messages. Tyler, please call me back. I know you're angry, but we need to figure out what happens next. I've been thinking about what you said and you're right. We do need to talk. I miss you. I know I don't have the right to say that, but I do. And then the most recent one, Alex and I talked. I told him I need time to figure things out. Can we please try to work through this? I stared at that last message for a long time. She was willing to put things with Alex on hold to try to save our relationship. 2 days ago that would have been exactly what I wanted to hear. But now, sitting on my brother's deck with the city lights beginning to twinkle in the distance, I realized something had shifted inside me. I didn't want her to choose me out of guilt or obligation. And I didn't want to be someone's consolation prize. I'm going to go back to the apartment tomorrow, I told Ryan. We need to have a real conversation about how this ends. How it ends? Ryan raised an eyebrow. Not how it gets fixed? I think it might already be broken beyond fixing. Monday morning, I found Rebecca at the kitchen table with her laptop, working on what looked like a presentation for her marketing job. She looked up when I walked in, and I could see the hope and fear warring in her expression. Hi, she said softly. Hi. I sat down across from her, in the same spot where we'd had our confrontation 3 days earlier. The morning light streaming through our windows made everything look differente, sharper somehow, more real. I've been thinking, I started. Me too. Rebecca, I need you to be completely honest with me. Not because I'm trying to punish you or make this harder, but because I need to understand. Are you in love with him? She was quiet for a long moment, her fingers tracing the edge of her laptop. Yes, she said finally. I think I am. And are you in love with me? Another pause. I love you, Tyler. I'll always love you. But I don't think I'm in love with you anymore. I haven't been for a while. The honesty was brutal and necessary. I felt something inside me break, but it was a clean break, the kind that might actually heal properly. Okay, I said. Then I think we both know what we need to do. Moving out took longer than I'd expected. 2 years of shared life creates a surprising amount of logistical complexity: whose name is on which bills, who gets the good coffee maker, how to divide books when you've both read and loved the same ones. Rebecca and I worked through it all with a politeness that felt strange after the intimacy we'd shared. She was patient when I had to come back for things I'd forgotten. I was understanding when she asked if she could keep the framed photo of us from last Christmas, even though it seemed counterproductive to her moving forward. It's not about Alex, she explained as we packed up the last of my kitchen supplies. It's about not wanting to erase the good parts of what we had. I understood that. Despite everything, we'd had good parts. Real ones. 3 weeks later, I was settled into a studio apartment in Fremont, closer to several of my regular clients and within walking distance of a coffee shop that made better Americanos than my old sanctuary on 5th Street. The space was smaller than what Rebecca and I had shared, but it felt like mine in a way that our old place never quite had. I was arranging my desk by the window when my phone rang. Rebecca's name appeared on the screen, and for a moment, I hesitated. We'd agreed to minimal contact while we both adjusted to our new realities. Hey, I answered. I hope it's okay that I'm calling. I wanted you to know that Alex and I are officially together now. I didn't want you to hear it from someone else. I looked out my window at the tree-lined street below, where people were walking their dogs and couples were holding hands and life was continuing in all its messy, complicated ways. Are you happy? I asked. I think so. It's scary starting something new, but yes, I think I am. Then I'm glad. And surprisingly, I meant it. Not because I'd stopped caring about her, but because I'd started to understand that love sometimes means wanting someone to find what they need, even if it's not with you. Tyler? Yeah. Are you going to be okay? I considered the question seriously. Was I okay? I was lonely sometimes, and I missed having someone to share daily observations with. I missed the comfort of routine and the security of knowing someone would be there when I came home. But I was also discovering things about myself that I'd never had space to explore when I was part of a couple. I'd started taking a photography class on Thursday evenings. I'd reconnected with friends I'd lost touch with during my relationship. I'd even gone on a few dates, nothing serious yet, but conversations that reminded me that there were other ways to connect with people, other kinds of chemistry to explore. I'm going to be okay, I told her. I think we both are. After we hung up, I sat at my desk and opened my laptop. I had a project due for a client, a local restaurant that wanted a new logo design. It was the kind of work that required focus and creativity, the kind that reminded me why I'd chosen to freelance in the first place. But before I started working, I looked out my window again. The late afternoon light was hitting the trees just right, creating the kind of scene that would have made a beautiful photograph. I picked up the camera I'd bought for my class and stepped outside. The garden lights on my new street were just beginning to flicker on, and I realized that sometimes the most important thing you can do is learn to see familiar things in a completely different light. As I walked down the sidewalk, camera in hand, I thought about the story I would tell if someone asked how I'd ended up here. It would start with heartbreak, yes, but it wouldn't end there. It would be about learning that love isn't always about holding on. Sometimes it's about knowing when to let go. Sometimes it's about trusting that both people deserve to find where they truly belong, even if it's not together. The rain was starting again, but I didn't mind. In Seattle, you learn to find beauty in the weather you can't control. You learn to keep walking, keep looking, keep believing that around the next corner might be something worth discovering. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, you learn that the person you become after everything falls apart might be exactly the person you were meant to be all along.